Welcome to the Not in the Job Description podcast. I'm Scott McLaughlin.
And I'm Chris Kiernan.
No matter what type of job you've had, there were situations that happened to you during work that you couldn't wait to tell your friends about.
We interview a variety of guests about some of their crazy stories from work, from entry-level food service industry jobs to doctors and attorneys. We will explore funny, gross, embarrassing, scary, and sometimes almost unbelievable stories that people have experienced while on the job.
Keep in mind that our guests or the companies they work for may be masked in order to protect the innocent, or maybe even the guilty. On today's episode, we're going to talk to Dan, who started off in the door-to-door insurance sales business. Welcome, Dan. You know, I guess I would just ask, we've had some conversations in the past about door-to-door sales, and I can only imagine how tough that job is. I don't think I have the stomach for it. Like, how did you start in this business, and what product were you selling?
Supplemental type of insurance, accident, cancer, disability type insurance. And interesting how I got into the business was a buddy of mine graduated college, and he sees a classified ad in the newspaper. And it says, if you're sports minded and you want a career in sales, to call this number. I'm like, well, okay, that's me. No, there's nobody more sports minded than I am. So I dial the number, and this guy answers the phone and says, hello. I'm like, I'm calling about the ad. He goes, okay, I've got an interview opening tomorrow afternoon at 3:00. I'm like, okay. Well, before I could even get off the phone, he hangs up and he gives me the address, and I have to go to the interview. I walk into the interview, still have no idea what this is, interviews me for a half hour. Then he makes me take the Wonderlic test.
Like, so you're thinking you're either going to be an NFL quarterback.
right. And I'm like, I'm ready to rock and roll here. So then I take the Wonderlic, and he grades it right in front of me. You know how you have to have a certain score? I'm
right.
Like, how'd I do? He goes, oh, you did all right. Okay. So then he proceeds to tell me that it's insurance sales. And I'm like, what in the world does this have to do with sports minded?
Right.
Well, he tells me that most people who are successful in sales are sports minded. They're competitive.
Just competitive, right.
I'm like, all right, that's me. So then he makes it feel like I have to compete against 14 other people to get this job. Well, come to find out, it was probably just me and another person that came in for an interview for the day. So he goes, we're going to call back people who qualified tonight for a second interview tomorrow, which is actually a field demonstration. So later tonight, I'm waiting by the phone. I get the phone call. I'm like, he's like, okay, we'll come back in tomorrow, prepared to spend the day with one of my managers on a demo. I'm like, all right. Show up the next day. I get in the car with this guy I have never met, and he proceeds to take me around to show me how the job is done. Well, I come to find out what's not in the job description is he takes me to places that he knows, people that he knows,
right?
The businesses that are welcoming.
Look how easy this is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, so then I get back, and then I get back to the main boss, and he's like, okay, well, we'll let you know. Again, takes the job away from me again, like it's a real competition. And then I get the call the next day. He's like, you got the job. I'm like, okay. So then I have to go to 2 weeks of unpaid sales training in Pennsylvania, and then come back out and start going down the street with my manager. That's kind of the start of of my insurance.
So 2 weeks of unpaid sales training.
Yes. And then you work a week, and then you get then you finally get your paycheck. So I was 3 weeks out before I got my first paycheck. Now, how would that fly today?
Right.
And so then once you officially got the job and you're out on your own, instead of taking you to the nice lay-down type sales where you know it's a guaranteed hit, did they just kind of drop you off in some not-so-great areas? Or
yeah, so that's kind of one of the bad raps that my company and myself got. A lot of people think that we got in a van, they drop you, 6 people, they drop you off at a street, and then they pick you back up 4 hours later or 6 hours later. That's not the case. I was in my own car. And I actually was smart enough to be dumb enough to do exactly what they told me to do. I mean, you just knock on every door and introduce yourself. And a couple things happened when I would knock on the door. First of all, there's a technique that you have to do. You got to open that screen door, and you got to stick your foot in it. You cannot talk through a screen door. So you open the screen door, knock on the door, introduce yourself. I deal with your neighbors, drop a few names, and then you would do the shuffle. I would look down at my feet. I'd say, or if I step in, I'd look down at my feet and shuffle my feet and kind of watch what they would do out of the top of my eye. If they would kind of take a step back, I would just barge right in the door.
Oh, wow.
And once you're in the house, you're in the house. Now I'm good to go. Then you just start talking about pictures on the wall and who's this and that. But a few times I would misread that where I would put my head down.
And that's the first time you got shot?
Right. I actually would headbutt or run into them, and then I'd take a step back, and then at that point I'd actually just try to bring them out on the porch and show them the policy that I was selling, which was a canned presentation. I can still give it today from the early 90s. And I just give that all day long. I would literally go door to door. And where I grew up, and I grew up in a sheltered environment in the mountains. I went to church 3 days a week. If I wasn't in church, I was hunting or fishing. I wasn't exposed to anything. So when I grew up in the mountains, it was rural, route, woods, dry. There was no businesses. I would go to a town and there would be 3 businesses walking, and the rest of the week I would just go door to door.
And let me just get this out of the way, because I will have door-to-door salespeople come into my neighborhood, and no offense, Dan, I look at that like, oh gosh, here we go. And most of the time, they're selling like, hey, I was just talking to, much like your techniques, Sally next door, and they don't like mice, so they pretty much put up a barrier to get them away from their house. But good chance they're going to come to your house unless you buy this. We get a lot of that stuff. And as much as we kind of joke about that, and on a prior episode, we talked about specifically, I think it was Kirby vacuums. And we talked about them because Chris sold them, our friend Travis sold them, and we joke about, oh my gosh, who would buy that? Well, I personally know about 5 people that have Kirby vacuums. And, while the door-to-door sales is very unique, I know people that have had those vacuums for 25 years. I mean, it's a good product. It's not like everyone has the ability to buy those things, but it's not like the product was junk and somebody got ripped off. I mean, it's just a different way to reach a customer. So, I think it's important for people to remember it may not be your cup of tea, but there's a lot of value involved there.
Yeah, and we have good policies. I have people that pay premium, and if they get hurt, we send them money, and I've made a lot of good friends over the years because I've helped them in the time of need. So you're right, we had good products. Now, when I sold the products, I would make $8 or $16 an application.
Big money,
back
man.
in the day. I would sell 5 people in a day and make $80.
Nice.
But times have changed since then. And of course, by the way, too, I played the part. I had the pocket protector, the flat top haircut, the mustache, the tie that was short, comes up to your belly button. I looked like the insurance guy.
The insurance guy, or what was that movie where he was wandering around beating people up? I can't remember. Walking. I can't remember what it was now. Anyway, yeah, that ruined my own joke there. Right. But doing the whole door-to-door thing, you've got to run into different scenarios. And I will say, the one thing I appreciate by the door-to-door stuff is you're probably working with a lot of people who maybe they don't have a personal financial planner. Maybe they're not aware of things that are available to them. So at the very least, people are offering a service to people that otherwise might not even be aware of options.
Oh, absolutely. For sure. And I see it all out there, and I have seen it all. I've been doing it for 28 years. And the door-to-door part has kind of faded away in the last, like residential in the last 15 years with the internet. People do a lot of different ways. But back in the day, that was, I can remember growing up, and my mom and dad had an insurance guy come to our house to collect a premium every 6 months or a year. It was Bernie. I remember Bernie would show up. There's Bernie coming to get the insurance money. So back in the day, that was how it was.
So going door to door, it's got to be a little, I don't know if scary's the word, or maybe even exhilarating, because you're knocking on that door and you have no idea what you're about to walk into.
Yeah. So early on, I would literally say a prayer when I would knock on the door that hope nobody would answer the door, especially when I was with my manager. I had no idea. Kind of had to do, but you don't know what to say, you don't know how to act, and it just one of those things where I just kept doing it and doing it. Now, the little technique when you pull into a rural route house is you open your door and you slam your door. You open it and you slam it twice, because there's these 4-legged creatures called dogs that sometimes lurk in the bushes and wait till you get out of the car before they come running. So you got to make sure that there's no animals. And then, you walk up to the door and you stick your foot in it. And now sometimes the door is open or there's commotion in the house. Now, one time I walked up to a door and I hear a vacuum cleaner. And as I'm looking in, the screen door is open. As I look in, I can hear a vacuum and I can see a cord running down the hallway. So I knock and I'm like, hello, nothing. And as the vacuum cleaner starts to get louder coming down the hallway, here comes this younger lady vacuuming in her bra.
Oh, gosh.
And she turns and sees me, and she's like, and covers up. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. And then I have to stand. I didn't want to just leave. So I stood there. She came to the door. I explained to her what I was doing. I actually showed her the policy. She's like, you got to come back and talk to my husband. I'm like, okay. Now talk about, I don't ever really want to go back.
Right.
But I go back later that evening and show him the policy, and nothing, it's never brought up. It didn't bring up anything during the presentation. Now, at the end of the presentation, the price of my policy at that point was $40 for 6 months. So I closed him. I said, it's just $40 for 6 months. And I said, that's before my tip, as a joke. He looks me straight in the eye and says, Dan, you already got your tip today.
At least he had a good sense of humor.
Right, yep. So I've seen it all out there.
So I know there's got to be scenarios where you mentioned dogs and dangers like that. You have to have had some dangers from people who weren't happy with you just even being in front of them, right?
Yeah, I had a guy that thought I was a scam guy, and when I go to leave, he was on a farm, he went and locked his gate, just locked the gate. I'm like, I'm holding my hands out the window. I'm like, can I leave? And they call the sheriff, and the sheriff has to come ask me who I am and go through the whole, give my ID and stuff, and then just lets me leave. Yeah, there's been many a time where people just are just mean, and it's just part of the deal. I just, I roll with it, and as you get older, you try to pick and choose who you go to. But some of the houses on the rural routes, that was the ones I wanted to go to that weren't, that they need insurance, and my premium was a low cost premium of $20 or $40 for 6 months, and that was where I had a lot of my success. But you have to put up with, when you can smell the inside of the house from outside the house.
Yeah.
That's a little challenging to maybe try to get in there and sit down with, some of the houses aren't the best, but that's what I did.
You talk about your training. I don't know if I have ever told this story. I don't know if Chris knows this one, but I had a very similar scenario right after college. I applied for a job, and this is 100 years ago, so it was in the newspaper, or the town crier yelled it out, whatever. So I applied for this job, and it was the same thing. Sports-minded people, call this number, and they were great because they were a little coy. They were like, oh, let me check and see if we have any spots open. It was the whole, great. These are salespeople, right? So they get me in there, and I talk with the guy for half an hour, and he says, come back on Saturday, and we'll give you a try. I'm like, great. So I go back on Saturday, and while I'm there, I notice that there's like 20 other people. And he walks into the room, and he's got like 3 people with him, and he breaks us all up. So we're in groups of like 3 or 4. We get in this guy's car, and he says, we're going to go sell at this little town that's nearby. It's actually about 40 minutes away. So we're driving there, and the whole time we have no idea what we're selling. We have no idea. They could have just left us for dead somewhere in the woods. So we get to this place. This kid, he's probably a year older than me. He gets up and opens up the hatchback of his trunk, and he has boxes of calculators. And I'm like, okay, what are we doing? He was like, we're going business to business sales, man. I said, but what are we selling? And he points these calculators. So I'm like, oh, what have I done? I've just wasted a whole Saturday because he's not going to drive me home. And we end up knocking on like door to door. It would be a barbershop. Hey, we're selling these calculators. I don't need a calculator. It's only $5. All right. They buy this $5 calculator that he probably bought for 10 cents. And we went up and down the street. And finally, he wanted to go somewhere else. And I said, you know what, dude, I already figured this out. Not for me. He goes, well, I'm working the rest of the day. You can come along or do whatever you want.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up having to call my wife and go, you got an extra 45 minutes to an hour and a half to come get me because I'm not finishing out this day. But he literally was going up and down the street hawking $5 calculators. And I got to thinking about it when I pulled a spreadsheet out much later in life and was like, okay, I was with him for 4 hours. He probably sold 20 calculators. What does that look like in a full day? What does that look like? I'm sure it was calculators one day, staplers the next, but that's a tough way to make a living. But I'll never forget, like, the one thing that, as much as I didn't want to do that job, That dude had a can-do attitude. When he was walking into every business, he was everybody's friend. And the one thing that was weird, though, is it's a calculator. It's damn near a commodity today. It almost was then, too. But he was out there and he was selling it, and he was selling it totally off of his charisma. And I couldn't believe how well he was doing with that. But you have to have some kind of gift of gab to do that job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And early on, too, you kind of think of it as I'm really not selling insurance. I'm selling myself. You're selling because, listen, does anybody want to buy insurance? Heck, I don't want to buy insurance. It's just it's a premium. So you have a positive attitude when you walk in, and you just basically make a friend, and then you sell an insurance policy on the side. So you're right. You have to have that drive. And I guess, like I told you before, I just didn't know any better. I just did what I was told to do. You do this, and kind of doesn't work a lot today with other people who worked with me. I'm just going to go. I'm not going to fail. Failure was really never an option. And actually, there were 19 people in my unpaid 2-week sales training class, and I was the last one left after 6 months. I mean, to be in the same company, the same job for 28 years is
wow.
Is rare. But you're right. You have to be able to, like when the cat jumps in the back of my window when I'm at a farm, it eats my roast beef sandwich out of my back seat. You just kind of like, okay, I'll go get another one.
That kind of leads me to one of the questions too. Early on, when you were doing more door to door, was this a thing where you were at your home every night, or did you literally have to go and travel and stay places over longer periods of time?
So my career has been I've worked in 4 different states. So I worked in out west and so depending on where I was. Now, when I first started, I'd be home every night. Now, there'd be a few training programs that I would have to go away and just work in a different town and stay in a hotel.
Unpaid, I assume.
Actually, I think they did charge us something for the rooms. So, depending on the results of something. But yeah, but now when I worked out west, I went on actually in the late 90s, I was on the road for 40 out of 52 weeks one year. Here's a funny story on that. Back in the day in a hotel, you had to hit a 9 to get to do a local call. I would get back home and I'd pick my phone up, and after being on the road, I would hit the 9 on my phone from my house, thinking I was still in a hotel. That's how many weeks I traveled back in the day. But yeah, most of the time I would be able to get home. But yeah, we had the option if I wanted to go on the road and see. It doesn't matter. You can drop me out of a helicopter in any state in the United States, and it's the same job. There's just no difference.
And so then you would travel to sell the insurance, and then of course this is pre-technology. So then you had to backtrack some months later to actually collect on the premium, right? Because they weren't really being billed or doing automatic debit out of their checking.
Yep, that's how it worked for up until 2009. I think we would collect for 6 months. So the premium would be paid for 6 months. We would have to go back and collect that. Now that made for a challenge. We would, again, people think we're debit collectors. I hated that when they thought it was debit collectors. I would want to go back and see the people that I wrote. Now, we talked earlier, this has been going on for a long time. I would service accounts. Still to this day, I have some policyholders that I see that purchased the policy with my company in the late 60s.
Wow.
And their premium is $1.50 a month for their policy because it doesn't change. So, but I would have to, that was a challenge. When I got into management too, I would not only myself to go collect, Chris, but I would have a team to go collect. So they would try, and if they didn't get the payment from the policyholder, then I would go back and try to get it also. But we had all kinds of tricks up our sleeve to try to do it. And listen, 70% of these people are going to, even if we didn't collect their premium, they'd still send it in by mail, but we would collect 95% of their premiums by showing up in person. And we could have the opportunity to sell more insurance while we were there.
Sure.
But we'd have some neat tricks to try to get people to pay their premium. Like if I would knock on a door and know, I kind of think that they're in there, but I'm not sure. When I would leave, I'd walk by their garage, I'd take a stick and I'd lean it up against their garage door. So then later on that evening, if I drive by and I see the stick still leaning up against the garage door, I know they're not home yet. So I'm not going to go knock on their door. When they'd see the stick that had fallen down, I'd go knock on the door and they'd come to the door and I'd pay their premium. But some people didn't. Okay, just come to the door and tell me you don't want the policy. I don't want it anymore. But they would do all kinds. They'd send their kids to the door. They'd send a kid to the door and be like, "Is your mom or dad here?" No. There's 2 cars in the driveway. I can see it. So I'm like, okay, well, what color car does your mom drive? And then they would freeze. They would look to the side because their mom and dad are literally 4 foot beside him on the chair and didn't know what to say. And I'd let him off the hook. I'm like, whatever. Okay, I'll stop back. And then another one we would do, if I couldn't get somebody to come to the door, I would go to the neighbor's house who had already paid me as a policy holder. I'd use their phone and I would call next door because they had caller ID back there, and they'd recognize the number. Then they'd, oh, hey, it's me. I'm the guy. I'm going to come by and get your premium. Oh, okay.
That's funny. Now it's funny when I do all kinds of research on things that are happening for our episodes. I looked up a lot of things on how you started your career, which was door to door, and there are some ridiculous stories out there. I mean, and of course, not everyone's selling a product that has a lot of value. But I read something on Reddit, and I just thought this would be funny. This person said, when I was a rookie, I used to knock with my mentor. If he would knock into somebody and right off the bat, he could tell that they wouldn't qualify. He'd give them some ridiculous reason why he was there. But the craziest part was he did it with such conviction and he would never crack. This one time, there was a lady with a brown dirt or whatever smeared over the door. It went something like this. Hello, are you the homeowner? No, I'm renting. Okay, ma'am, we're here about the dookie, and he motions with his hand. We've been getting some complaints from the neighbors about the dookie that's on your door. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to clean that up. Yes, ma'am. I'm here because this is your final warning. We're going to be back next week to check if it's clean or not. And if it's not clean, there's going to be a citation. And the person says, okay, I'll clean it. Thank you, ma'am. And another time, he was with this guy, and he opens the door, and he sees that this guy has a deer head on his wall that's visible from the doorway. He said, I wasn't there, but he told the guy he was in violation of the Deer Head Treaty of 1847, and it needed to be removed and boxed up. He said, I wasn't there, but the guy actually boxed it up on the spot. And there were so many stories. This guy actually killed it on the sales team, but he was just quick on his feet. And if he thought this person doesn't qualify for the product, he would just screw with them. I think that's rude. Am I the only one here?
No, you're not. Actually, early on in my career, it didn't matter what the smell was or what the appearance was. I'm getting in that house. Now, as I got older, I would qualify people from the porch. If I didn't feel like I wanted to go into that home, I would come up with some ridiculous reason not to go in the house.
Yeah, I'm quite sure that I just can't imagine, even in 1950, that it was safe to walk into somebody's house. But nowadays, especially, the only thing that might save you is that they probably have a Ring doorbell, so they'll at least see you being killed on the camera somewhere.
For sure.
Well, what about when you first started? Again, this is pre-technology. You don't have a GPS on your phone. You didn't even have a GPS you could buy and plug into your car. So you're out traveling on these back roads. You just maps everywhere, or?
Oh my gosh, Chris, I'm telling you, I had a county map for every county in any state that I worked. Now, so you're right, because it's hard to figure out. So I have people that I have to go see that have our coverage and places I'm going to go to cold calls. So especially the renewals, I would take a red Sharpie and I would mark their house on this county map. Now, these county maps have that grid. So if it's 12,000 County Road 8, at the top is the numbers that go across, and then the number, and you have to match that up figure out the spot. Now, try driving down a back road holding a county map up in front of the steering wheel. That's not easy to do. So once I would service that account, I would take the red dot and cover it in with a black Sharpie. So when the day was done, I was hoping I didn't have a whole lot of red dots left, but it was ridiculously hard.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, the first day that I got a GPS was one of the best days of my life.
Right. So you get lost and have to ask for directions and things sometimes, or?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, good. This one guy, he's like, I'm trying to find a policyholder's house, and this is pre-911 too. And where I grew up, addresses were Route 3, Box 29A, or Route 2, and actually, the whole system that I sold from was a route month sales. So you had routes 1 through 6. Well, Route 1, I was always in this town in January and in July. That I was always in another town in February and August, 6 months difference, Route 2, Route 3, Route 4. So we would just repeat ourselves every single year. Well, this one guy, I'm trying to find this house, and he goes, oh, I know him. He's 2 looks up the road.
2 looks.
2 looks. Well, I'm like, I'm trying. At first, I pretended like I understood what he was telling me. And I'm like, okay, what do you mean? He goes, well, just look as far as you can look, drive to that spot, and then look as far as you can look again, and there's your guy. I'm like, okay, well, he was pretty accurate. So a mile and a half, maybe. I'm not real sure.
The original GPS guy.
Yeah, that's right. The two looks. I'm like, okay.
He obviously doesn't know how bad my eyesight is.
Right. I would have came up about 10 houses short.
Right.
Well, at least at least I could drive there. I lost my car one time in Perrysburg outside of Toledo. You park it in the downtown area, and I cold called the businesses for 3, 4, 5 hours, and I literally cannot find my car. And now I'm walking around trying to pretend like I'm not lost and not looking for my car and hitting the button on my keyless entry. I'm like trying to get it to beep so I can hear my car. And finally, I don't know, 45 minutes later, I found my car and I can leave.
That's crazy. I just can't imagine if my job was to travel doing that stuff. I'm sure, like anything else, if it's your day and it's what you do, you get used to it, and that's what you do. You had to also run across a multitude of characters. Anybody else that stands out or situations that you've run into that stands out to you while you were doing a lot of this travel for your work?
Characters, every day. I mean, you have the guy that doesn't stop talking when you're trying to do the deal. I'm like, I mean, we're 45 minutes in, and I haven't even presented the policy to you yet, and you have to try to figure out ways to be able to make him understand that I'm here for a reason. But I mean, just a lot of. I had a guy pass out on me one time.
He passed out on you.
Literally came to the door, opened the screen door, start to talk to him, boom, down the floor he goes, passed right out. Opened the door up. I tried to get him to set back up, call 911.
Oh wow.
And he's fine. I mean, he didn't go to the emergency room. I had a couple times traveling too. Not the best hotels. I don't know what kind of hotels you've ever stayed in.
A multitude.
Yeah. And now it's late out west. I'm got it's dark. I have to find a hotel, and you just pull into one in the middle of nowhere, desert. And you take anything you can get. Actually, one time the guy said, "Do you want the hourly rate?" I'm like, "No, I want the whole night." I didn't really understand what that was at the time, but I kind of do now. I was a shelter. Like I told you, I grew up a sheltered person. And then as I'm in the hotel room, I keep hearing this grinding noise, like chopping noise. I'm like, "What is going on?" I turn the light on once or twice, can't figure it out. Finally, I realize that there's a rat chewing the drywall in the corner of the hotel room, trying to get into my hotel room for the night.
Nice.
Not a whole lot of sleep that night.
Right.
No, I would be in my car. That's just me.
Yeah.
So I know some people in the real estate business, and every now and then they tell stories of the unexpected. You know, sometimes they'll run into somebody who looks like they're a pauper, and then you find out, yeah, they'd like to buy $1 million house. Or I had a friend who knocked on a door one time and said, "Hey, I've got some people who are interested in buying up some homes in this block because they want to change this to commercial. Would you be interested?" And the lady was like, "I've been asked before, but I think now I think I am really interested in selling." He was like, "Oh, great. Let me get your information. I need to talk to neighbors." And this person said, "No, you don't." And he said, "Well, I don't need to talk to the neighbors." And they said, "No, I own every house on this street." So he ended up doing one cold call knock, ended up selling like 10 houses so that this commercial group could come in and change the neighborhood. But have you ever had these scenarios where you've got something that was completely unexpected, good or bad?
Oh, absolutely. Kind of right along the lines of that story where I sell, a husband and wife, and he's like, "Listen, let me call my two sons, my brother, my sister," and they literally show up at the house I'm at. I've literally written insurance for an entire day, never left the kitchen table.
Oh wow! Because
of they like what I have, and that people just show up, and then you have the scenario of I'm in a house and I'm thinking there's no way that they're going to buy this policy, and then they walk over to a coffee can and reach in there. They don't reach to the bottom of the coffee can for the money. They're reaching to the top and pull out hundreds of dollars and purchase insurance. So you just never know.
That's crazy. Now, you'd mentioned earlier that the kind of products that you sold. Do you ever get notification when those products pay out? I was always curious, as an insurance salesperson, your job is really to sell the product. And I'm sure there's an entire group of people that service the product if it's ever needed to be used. But do you know of situations where people were able to benefit from the products you sold them?
Yeah, absolutely. So just recently, last couple of years ago, I had a guy wreck his motorcycle, paid out $70,000 some dollars for time in the hospital, intensive care. So let's go back to the early 90s. When somebody would get paid from our company, we would get they would show up in a rubber band for the counties that I was in charge of. It was called a claims paid check. And it was actually a somewhat copy of the check. So we would know everybody that collected from our policy. I would actually take them with me. And when I would go to close on the policy and they would say, well, we don't know if you pay, I would pull them out. Now, back in the day, you could actually show the name. And I would show pre-HIP. I would show them, look, so-and-so's used this, so-and-so. And I would show them 40. I would take out the early ones would be the $40 checks and the $100 payments. Then I'd get to the $1,000. And I always had multiple claims paid in the tens of thousands of dollars. And I would show them the people that collect. And then eventually where the name was blocked out. And then eventually, obviously, in the last, 15, 20 years, we can't show any names as far as claims.
Sure, yeah, right.
But tons and tons of claims. And that was a big proof of that we did take care of our policyholders. And I've had many people that will call me back on the phone and tell me, hey, without that check that you sent me, I would have lost my house. I would have lost my car. That's the gratifying part for me with the job. That's why I love to do what I do. It's one of those type of deals where I don't want people to get hurt. I don't want them to collect, but they have coverage when they need it.
Very good. I know that should be a pretty good place for referrals as well. If, hey, I turned my brother, sister, neighbor on to you because it helped me. I don't know. Did you get any referrals? For
sure. Yeah. We call it a referral chain. Sometimes it would take me literally days and weeks to catch up with the referrals. I would have lists and lists, and that's the people that we went to for the referrals, and we would get them and we'd offer them the coverage. And it was one of the easiest sales that we could make. But you worked hard to get the sale originally for somebody to have the coverage so you could have that.
But then the benefits then pay off down the road because now they're referring people, and that one hard sale turned into 5 easy sales.
And that's where the younger generation back in the day, they couldn't hang in there enough to get enough policyholders sold to be able to do that.
That kind of brings me to my next question. I've worked in call center kind of businesses, and I know Chris has too, but more on a professional level. What is the turnover like? I know that you started off, doing door to door, but eventually you became a manager. What's the turnover like in this type of a role today, knowing that it's not all door to door? But and tell us how it's changed as well.
So I've been a captive agent, which means I've only worked for one company my entire time. Most insurance agents now are 1099. They are appointed to dozens and dozens of insurance companies. So there's really no loyalty to one company. They're just trying to find the best deal for the policyholder. It's more of a broker-centric type thing now. But from a captive line, for me, turnover was off the charts. I mean, I think all insurance companies back in the day they were. I mean, like I told you, I had 19 people in my sales class, and I'm the one that lasted only 6 months. Everybody else was gone. So yeah, it's a grind. And I guess the big picture in my mind was, what else am I going to do if I can't do this? I didn't know what I was going to do for a career, so I just stuck with it.
Okay.
Do they still use that whole sports-minded kind of? Obviously, people don't read the classified ads to get a job, but maybe they're looking online, Indeed, or something like that. Have they stuck to their guns on that type of personality that they're after?
I think that's faded away more, and now they're more of an independent type of a 1099 organization recently. So they've gone away from that. But up until recently, when I dropped out of management, I always watched for the competitive person. I always tried to find the athlete, somebody that is in a career job that wants to make a better living for themselves.
I can tell you, though, the idea of being sports-minded, that is something that's still used today for sure.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people bring that up. I know, the place that I worked at, whenever we would hire managers, and sometimes it wasn't that we would blatantly say sports-minded, but we would look to see, did they play in team sports?
Sure.
Did they get involved in these things? Did they, sometimes you'd be looking to find out, do they like numbers and statistics? Or other times it's, do they know their place as a part of a team and know what their function is? So without a doubt, sports minded is certainly something to look for. And it's so much nicer now too because it applies to more people. I mean, it used to be there weren't as many women's sports and things like that, but sports minded is a very clear indicator to me that somebody knows how to work with others at the very least.
Oh, for sure, no doubt, teamwork. It's a big part of it.
So, in your time frame as being somewhat of a manager there, how many people do you think you've managed over all of your career?
I would say easily 300 to 400, maybe a few more. Yeah, I mean,
now, some of these people are just for one day, I'm sure, right?
Oh, well, okay, here's a good one. So the demo that I talked about earlier, where I rode around with when I was doing the interview, well, I had a demo last 30 seconds one time. The lady got in the car with me, and we met at a hotel lobby, got in the car with me. As I'm driving around the hotel, she's asking, is there a salary? Is there a paid vacation? Is there this? And we'd already went over this with her. And as I get around the backside of the hotel, she's like, I kept telling her no to all these questions. She's like, I'm not interested. Drop me back off. It was a 30-second demo.
Oh, well, that's better than waste your whole day.
Yeah, and
exactly.
I actually would I did the opposite of what my boss did to me early on. I would take on a demo when I was a manager, I would take them to the worst places. I would take them down the back road to some of the businesses that I knew weren't going to have a good response because I wanted to see if this person could handle a day like that. And
smart.
a lot of times, like you said, Chris, it would be an hour. Like, this is not for me. Take me home.
Right.
I can't handle doing this for a living.
Well, since you brought it up, what's like a good streak for getting policies versus not getting? I mean, is it common that you get one a day, one a week, one a month?
Yeah, and in our business, it was multiple sales a day. I kind of thought it was almost impossible not to get an app a day, but it does happen. It's sales, but as long as you put in the activity for the day, it would bounce back the next day, or for the week. I always told my agents, you don't get paid by the day, you get paid by the week. So stay with it. Now, when the pandemic hit, that made a whole different animal because we got shut down and we had to sell from our office. So I kind of went on a little streak and sold for 63 straight days from my office. Now, interesting that I bring this up because you're talking to people in person and now you're over the phone. I had a little issue during that sale. I would sweat profusely. My wife would walk down the office and I had no shirt on in the middle of the office, and she's looked like I'm like I just couldn't handle the phone thing, but I figured it out. But yeah, you did anything that you could do, but a sale a day, and we back on those collections, we would get paid a commission to collect those, so it's kind of like a modified salary back in the day.
Yeah. That
you had to collect premiums and then sell additional policies. And I guess back in the early '90s, a good paycheck for the week was $500-600 for the week, and prior to myself, just a few years before I got hired, the managers would meet back up with us, and I met up with my team on a Friday afternoon. I would have to meet back up with them, say in a restaurant or a pavilion or somewhere, and I would have to collect all of their applications, all their checks, and I would do like a checkout. There would be weeks where I would have, I have a team of 7 or 8 players. There were weeks where I would have $30,000 in checks and $10,000 in cash. And I finally figured out that if you go to one of those check cashing places, you get free money orders, because I would have to turn it into a money order,
right,
and then send it off to Chicago, and they would and we would get paid the following week. So and then you had to keep track of all that.
Well, that's kind of interesting. I imagine that this insurance game, just all these things that used to be so manual, it had to have changed so much over the past, 10 years, just with the internet and everything being done automated. And, I don't know from an insurance standpoint, I'll bet you most people do go to some of these larger brokers and just go, all right, I'm looking for wholesale term life insurance. Who's the best for me? Here's all my info. Who's going to give me the best rate?
Yeah, it punches it right out. It gives them options. That's exactly how it's gone today compared to, when I got my first iPad, it's going to sound kind of funny, it's 7-8 years ago. It was probably we went away from paper applications. It was the best day ever. Because I didn't have to do all this paperwork anymore. It was automatic, and it would make my my family life a whole lot better too. But yeah, I would have to fax in a sheet of paper on a Monday morning so my agents would get paid on Thursday. I mean, we were still,
Wow.
this is as little as 10 years ago. But yeah, right now you hear the advertisements on the radio all the time. Just call a number up and you can get life insurance. But some people still want that in-person insurance guy. They want me to show up. They want us to be in person to sit down, because not a lot of people are. There are some people, especially out, are not into that, into the internet.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I think we're a dying breed of people who like some of that. I know the people who service me. I still have my insurance with one person, and it's my home insurance and car insurance. And it started because a friend of mine's mother was an insurance agent. And, she was the one consistent thing, because no matter who bought that insurance group, she always worked there. And we were like, we don't care. As long as Jeannie's still working there, that's where we're going to do our insurance. Well, we just found out that it went through another sale, and it happened like just literally in the past couple weeks. And my wife called up about something, and they were like, oh, well, your policy's been sold to the so-and-so group. And we said, oh, is there somebody we can still talk to there? And they were like, no, well, there's some of the people are there, but we can't guarantee you'll talk to them. It was very weird, but I think that's just how things are going today. That personal kind of touch is being kind of put to the wayside for saving a couple bucks.
Oh, there's no doubt. Absolutely. And when it comes to making a good impression early on and getting a client to stay with you, and I still have clients to this day that call me up and say, hey, I have somebody else for you to go see. And that's something that you have to stay on top of in customer service and help them do what they do so you can continue to have that. But I think that's the best part of my job.
Well, thank you very much for spending the time and talking to us about what started off as door-to-door sales and turned out just being insurance sales. So, Chris, what have we learned today?
Yeah, I learned that if you're lost on the back roads, just go 2 looks up the road and you'll be where you need to be.
That's true. Yeah. I learned if you really don't want someone to sell you door to door, don't let them get their foot in that screen door, because they're coming right in. Is that right, Dan?
That's right. I'm coming through.
Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. I'm Scott McLaughlin.
I'm Chris Kiernan.
Saying,
we'll see you at work. Thank you for listening to the Not in the Job Description podcast. If you have a story you'd like to share, or if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, please let us know by sending us an email with a brief description of your story to stories@notinthejob.com.